I'm very optimistic about what the ultimate impact of these vaccines will be. When you get a certain percentage of the population vaccinated, we can create an umbrella of herd immunity literally over the entire country. That will take several months to occur, but I feel confident that if we get a substantial proportion of the population vaccinated, that we can actually end this epidemic as we know it in this country.
The vaccine is important, and it's a protective measure. Wearing a mask is important also. Physical distancing of 6 feet is important.
The vaccine is a huge step forward, but it is not a silver bullet. And so after people receive the vaccine, we still need to do the simple things that we know work.
As a community, we build empathy, curiosity, joy, and connection when we share stories with you. Welcome to Storytellers Project, part of the USA Today network.
Hi, I'm Brett McGinnis, the engagement editor with the Reno Gazette-Journal, and your MC for tonight's West and Sunbelt Storytellers Project show. We really appreciate you taking a chance on live storytelling and sharing your evening with us. Tonight, we're joining Humana and 5 Americans from throughout the Western United States to create community. Since 2016, Storytellers Project has brought more than 100 shows each year to communities across the country. But we're online only this year because while it feels safe to be together in theaters, it feels necessary to be together online. So we've handpicked incredible, inspiring storytellers to bring you My Family, My Culture. Please help me welcome our tellers from across the region. Melissa Sosa Fees of Phoenix, Arizona. Sean Ewart of Los Angeles, California. Dr. Charlinda Hodley of Tucson, Arizona. Leon Malmet of South Lake Tahoe, California.
Hello.
And Kirsten Coy-Garber of Salem, Oregon. Now, I want to inform our viewers, one of tonight's stories touches on suicide. Help is available. The National Suicide Prevention Line is available 24/7 at 1-800-273-8255 in English and 1-888-628-9454 in Spanish. It's free and confidential for those in distress who need prevention or crisis resources for themselves or their loved ones. You can also visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Now, tonight is not a TED Talk, not Toastmasters. It's not a how-to talk, an inspirational speech, an educational lecture, or a slideshow. We won't sell you anything except maybe a subscription. This is storytelling, and storytelling is based on visiting. You open your heart and your mind and you pay attention to a person you care about and want to feel closer to. So we invite you to do that tonight. Some of these storytellers will be polished and professional. Some will be casual and conversational. We ask you to receive all of them because that's how community change happens. We believe creating empathy and understanding is vital at all times, and especially in times of uncertainty. Our first storyteller tonight is Melissa Sosa Fees, who shares a story about linking one generation to the next in the kitchen.
I know that the memories of my grandmother are intertwined with her cooking, her kitchen, and the memories we made there. And I believe that when you cook a recipe of someone who's gone before you, you create an endless table back to them and you honor them. This year at Christmas, we were in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, and I received texts from cousins and my godmother on the red chili that we use for the tamales. And why were they texting me? Because in spring break of 1991, when I was home from grad school, I took on the project of trying to capture the taste of my grandmother's kitchen. And who was my grandmother? My nana. Her name was Ramona Garcia Cesate. She was the youngest daughter in a family of 10 children and immigrated to America. There she met Candido Cesate. They got married and had 8 children, 2 boys followed by 6 girls, my mom being the youngest. And her cooking was epic. She had 6 sons-in-law, and they loved her cooking. And as all of her tribe did, those 8 grew to have 23 kids. The next generation's over 35, and the next one's just getting started. In fact, I found out we're having a new addition to the family this November. I have a cousin named Mark that told me once, I'd eat anything that she would cook in that cast iron pan of hers. The funny thing about this project that I'd taken on is I did not know how to cook then. I mean, a baked potato was basically like a big deal to make. Normally it was to-go food and bagels. So I came for this project armed with a set of red measuring cups and spoons. My grandmother didn't have that in her kitchen. And we took on trying to create these recipes. I think I wanted to capture her in her natural habitat. So she would take the salt and put it in her hand, and then we would pour that into a paper towel, and I would tip that into a measuring spoon and then record it. That cumbersome method didn't last long, but we did pretty well until we got to a liquid ingredient. So we were measuring some oil in a 1/4 cup, and I didn't have a liquid measuring cup. I just had this set of dry ingredients. I didn't know there was such a thing as a liquid measuring cup back then. And so my grandmother would leave a little lip on the cup so that you wouldn't spill it. See, when she cooked, she used whatever was on hand. So if she was making a recipe of her tortillas, she might grab the ASU souvenir cup, because at that point she knew 2 cups of warm water, well, that's about at Sparky's ear. And she could take that to her bowl without spilling a drop. So I would look at her and I'd say, Nana, you have to fill it to the top. And she looked at me and said, every time? Well, we got through this list, and this list of recipes was my favorites. Her salsa, her beans, her rice, her abondiga soup, calabasitas, which is a squash dish. And the crown jewel of her kitchen was her chile colorado, her red chili. A friend of ours in Boston nicknamed it red gold because it's one of his favorite things to eat. Well, in the 5 years that followed that spring break, a lot of things happened. I got married, and then a year later, we lost my grandfather suddenly. And my husband and I moved to Boston. And it's the fall of 1996, and it's my first fall away from home, and I got a call from my dad, and he said my grandmother had had a serious heart attack. I flew home, and luckily she survived, and John and I returned for Christmas, and Christmas meant the Christmas tamales. And tamales was a big deal in my grandmother's family. I mean, it started with her making tamales as the gift, her gift to her 8 children. But as we grew and grew and grew, it became more of a tamale co-op where everyone would give a little money, and then everyone would get together to make the tamales. And the tamales start with the meat cutting, and my Uncle Gabriel's in charge of getting the meat. Sometimes they've cut as much as 65 pounds. That happens the night before it's cooked. And then the next morning, somebody's job is to get the masa freshly ground from a specialty grocery store. And then the broth and the fat and the salt is hand kneaded for the prepared masa. We would put in these big tins, and you take a corn husk, smooth side on the top, and place it on the masa and take the back of a big spoon and spread it very thinly. Now, I can do it like this, but I can't actually spread that well. It's a very skilled job. And my childhood is filled with memories of my mom and my Aunt Leslie over this bowl of masa, spreading for hours, the stories flowing and the laughter. One story they always love to tell is about the year that the women had swine flu and the uncles and my tata maybe had to spread. It didn't go well. They weren't very patient, and the tamales came out super thick, and they nicknamed tamalones. Well, after you spread the tamale, it goes over and is filled with a spicy pork red chili filling, folded, and then we wrap them in parchment because we've made as many as 350 or more, and it's easier for stacking, and then they're steamed. But that day was different. We didn't have my grandmother. She had been admitted to the hospital unexpectedly the day before. So we were very unprepared to try to make the tamales without her. She'd been in charge since 1934. Now I have aunts that could definitely step in, but there wasn't a rush. These were the Christmas tamales for about 100 people. So I got volunteered and I found myself at my grandmother's gas stove, the right front burner in her Eden kitchen, all my family to the back. We were a little bit emotional that day. It hadn't been that long since we lost my grandfather, and now my Nana was in the hospital. I was looking back at her pink backsplash, and I started to melt the fat into the big tin that we were going to make the chili in. And I thought about her. I knew I had learned to make these recipes because one day I would have to learn to make them without her, but it was all happening too soon. But I said a prayer, and I'm sure with her help, she got me through that first batch. Aunt Connie took the next batch, and we were off to the races. We got through all of them. My Uncle Mundy is the oldest of the family, of the 8 aunts and uncles, and he came by for lunch that day. I'm sure he had his doubts. I mean, he was counting on his 7 younger siblings to take over Christmas tamales without their parents for the first time ever. Well, we barely let him get in the door where we unwrapped one for him to taste. And I remember, and he took the tamale in his hand, took a bite and says, "That is good." He was a little surprised, but he was very pleased, and Christmas was saved. My grandmother was released, and we had a wonderful Christmas with her that year and for 2 more. The year after she passed, I published a family cookbook of all of her recipes, plus one from each of my aunts, and a lot of the wives from my cousins, because they're all amazing cooks too. And people still use it today. I think I have a few of them memorized, but it's a great resource. This Christmas, I had to enlist my 5 children to each take a tamale station, and they did great. I think all of them spread masa better than I do, but I was still doing the red chili. We got through it, and it's so nice that when they come home from college or have a special occasion, often their requests are the recipes of my grandmother's kitchen, her avondiga soup or her red gold. And I believe that every time I make them, I create an endless table back to her. And I thank her for everything she gave the family. And we keep the tradition going.
Thank you, Melissa. I think you've made the entire audience very hungry. One quick note to the audience: you can show your appreciation for Melissa and all of tonight's storytellers with the like button and reactions. Humana is sponsoring Storytellers Project shows nationwide and now virtually because they believe that sharing stories and connecting as humans, online or in person, makes for healthier people and healthier communities. And we need those connections to each other and to health now more than ever. As COVID vaccinations become available in communities across the country, Humana strongly encourages you to consider getting the vaccine and to discuss with your doctor what is best for your health. Visit Humana.com for more about what they're doing each and every day to connect you to better health in your community.
The COVID-19 vaccines can be our chance to get back to our plans, to get back to each other, to life. But it's okay to have questions like, can the vaccines give you COVID-19? You cannot get COVID-19 from a vaccine. Find the latest information at getvaccineanswers.org.
Our second storyteller tonight is Sean Ewart, who forged a closer bond with his father in the face of a family tragedy.
I sneezed myself awake at 2 a.m. in Chicago, Illinois. I have never felt like this before. I checked my cell phone and I have a voicemail. It's from the LA County coroner. Her name was Colleen and she's an investigator. It's about my parents and I'm to call them right away. So, like a good spouse, I wake up my partner who's sleeping soundly next to me. Something tells me there won't be any more sleep tonight. We look at each other and decide this must be a spam call. But we go to the computer, We put in her name, Colleen, LA County investigator, and we wait. I can still feel the pit in my stomach when her smiling face, her job, her location, everything popped up. This, unfortunately, is real. So I call the coroner. A nice woman answers. She's super friendly. I'm very composed, and I explain that I am in Chicago. And she says, okay, let's see. Here's your file. It's your mother. She's committed suicide with a gun. And I say, and my father? And she says, oh, he's fine. He had a mild heart issue and some PTSD. We sent him to the hospital. So I tell her I'm going to come out as quick as I can to Los Angeles. And she says, take your time. We have your mother. She's safe with us. And I think to myself, oh, it's good to know that the dead are safe. So from 2,000 miles away, somehow I find my father roaming around a hospital gift shop in the middle of the night. An older version of my dad picks up the gift shop phone. And he says, well, she finally did it. And then we talk like not a day has passed. He's weirdly calm and relaxed. I think it's the drugs they gave him. I tell him I'll be out there as soon as I possibly can. And I'm bringing John. Now, I've been out to my parents since 1991, but I never brought home anyone I had dated. I mean, it's one thing to say you're gay. It's another thing to say, hey, this is the guy I'm gay with. I mean, I was a little nervous about, seeing my dad after so long and picking up the loose ends of my mother's life. But I was also kind of nervous about bringing a boyfriend home for the first time at 46 years old. I approach the front of my parents' post-war mustard yellow tract home, and there's a bullet hole in the side of the house. I guess this really did happen. I clear away some cobwebs and I knock on the door, and a man who looks like my grandfather answers. My boy, he says to me. He gives me a great big hug, and I hug him back, and whoa, he's smaller than I remember. With an arm outstretched like I'm introducing a co-star, I say, and this is John. And he says, of course it is. And he gives John a big hug. This is going well. I look over my dad's shoulder into the house, and there's piles of paper and yarn. It's kind of musty. It kind of smells like a hot attic. There's some furniture in weird places. And I see my mother's room, and I can just feel her energy blocking it. My mother had an issue with paper and yarn. Both had built up in the home after many decades. So while we were cleaning, there were some disturbing discoveries. There were a lot of suicide notes, half written, several completed ones to my dad. And then at the bottom of a particularly big pile of paper, I find it. A note addressed to me, written in the same hand that she used to write my absence excuse notes when I was in elementary school. The note reads, Sean, I hope you have a happy and long life. My decision has nothing to do with you. I read the note to my dad. He doesn't even look up. I put the note in my pocket. We work for days, hauling out the memories, stopping to laugh and cry with my dad. The paper shredder overheats. So does my dad. He has to go lay down for a while. We take 7 loads of my dad's Chevy Blazer to the Goodwill, and we get a dumpster from the city, and we fill that too. And John, he ends my mother's online life. No more orders of paper and yarn. Dad drives us to Forest Lawn to process my mother. We come in the door and we say, oh, we don't have a lot of time. No memorial service, suicide. She's at the morgue. A tall, handsome young man in a black Banana Republic suit escorts us through the process. He shows us a vast array of remembrance jewelry. Would we like an amulet with some of Mother's ashes in it to remember her by? And out of nowhere, my father says, oh no, she won't have a toehold in this world. Then we're shown some cremation vessels. John is particularly drawn to a very strange looking wicker basket that looks like it was made for baby Jesus. And I get the giggles thinking of my mother sitting up in this basket, waving to everybody, going through the port of Los Angeles. We actually settle on a papyrus urn that will gently release her ashes into the water like, oh, I don't know, like a bartender mixing a drink. The tall, handsome young man grabs John and says, I need you. They go over to a drop-down menu, and he's frantically looking for something to call John. We could call you a partner or boyfriend, but there isn't any such choice. So he picks friend, which is kind of nice since my mother didn't have any friends. At least we gave her one for the record. So this whole time, I had a bag next to me with one of my mother's nightgowns in it because I wanted her to be clothed when she went through the cremation. And I take the bag and I give it to the tall, handsome young man. And it's a very strange feeling. He takes the bag and puts it under his desk. And he says, okay, well, that's it. Your mother is all scheduled to go out with Cap and Lee. And I get some nervous laughter. So does my dad and John. We're like, what the hell is Cap and Lee? Well, it's Cap and Lee's boat that takes the ashes out into the harbor, into the ocean. Would we like to be there? Would we like to be present with the ashes at the end? And all three of us politely decline. I get seasick very easily. But the dignity and respect that the tall, handsome young man gives my mother is absolutely beautiful. My father writes the check and we leave. Now, this entire time, I've been calling my dad, Dad. I never got to call my dad, Dad. I never called him Dad because my mother insisted I use first names, which was snotty and I had to defend it for years. And as an only child, it just made things even worse. But I'm calling him Dad on this trip and it has such a great ring to it. Dad. And I think he really likes that I'm calling him Dad. So Dad says, how do you feel about all this? And I say, relieved. Is that okay? And he says, yes. It's time to go back to Chicago, and I don't want to leave. We make a split decision that we will relocate to Los Angeles to be closer to him. I give my dad a great big hug and walk to the rental car, and John is behind me. And way off by the house, we hear my dad say, hey, John, where's my hug? My father lost his wife, but he gained a son-in-law and a granddog, and we're a different kind of family now. And I finally know what it's like to really be a son.
Thank you so much, Sean. We know it took a lot of heart to share that story with us. Tonight's show is produced by the Ventura County Star, the Salem Statesman Journal, the Arizona Republic, the Arizona Daily Star, and the Reno Gazette-Journal, and brought to you by countless journalists who helped coach tonight's storytellers and produce tonight's show. You can support our work by liking and sharing this show, checking out our websites, vcstar.com, statesmanjournal.com, azcentral, tucson.com, and rgj.com. Our next storyteller is Dr. Charlinda Hodley, who tightened her connections with her home and family by taking a challenging journey.
So yate she Charlinda Hodley Inishya. My name is Charlinda Hodley, and I introduce myself in my native language. The theme of my story today is reflecting on the teaching Ta Wachit Ego, and in the Nebazad, that means it is up to you. Early mornings begin with my parents listening to the KTN radio station, me fiddling around with the oil lamp as I watch my dad create some fire with the wood stove. My siblings and I would rush to finish our Spam and potatoes because we saw the yellow school bus coming down the street. My parents would always yell, "Teenth Law, hurry up, don't miss the bus." After a day at school, my siblings and I would come home and fight over a bag of hot Cheetos as we get ready to watch the movie Power Rangers. We didn't have electricity, so we had to deal with a generator sound in the back of the movie. My baby brother Junior was so small, I remember him crawling around in his diapers. It's finally cool for us to take a walk to my Aunt Dolly's house. Walking past the horse corral, we listen to my dad share his life stories. He tells us all that he has overcome, as well as telling us why him and my parents have worked hard to provide a life for my siblings and I. Pointing in different directions, he tells us, Shiyaje, this is your home. No matter where you go, this is your home. As I look around me, I'll take a glance at a distance, and I see our hogan and our trailer. We didn't have much, but I'm reminded of all that we have with our parents' teachings. Arriving at Aunt Dolly's house, we gather underneath a big green tree where I instantly lie on the mattress and enjoy a book to read. She often gave me Archie comic books or Ramona books to read. While I'm reading, Dolly starts to make fry bread for us. Her and my dad are talking, sharing stories. They're laughing so hard and wiping tears off their face. And all of a sudden, the moment gets serious. Dolly says to my siblings and I, Shiyaje, make something of yourself. You and your dad are working hard to provide a life for you. So numerous times that evening, I heard the saying, Ta wujit ego, it is up to you. College was not a normal conversation in my household. My life changed when an administrator from the University of Arizona attended my high school to talk about the college. Looking at the brochures and looking at the PowerPoint, the campus was so beautiful. At that moment, I told myself that I needed to go to college in order to create a life for myself. Reading my U of A acceptance letter, I found that I was awarded the MacBook scholarship. Why would they give me a book? Laughing, my teacher explains that a MacBook is a laptop. At that moment, I realized how much I did not know about college or what to expect as I entered the urban life off the reservation. I worked closely with my high school teacher to apply to college. So when I told my mom that I was going to college, she was surprised. Handing her a Google printout of the maps to go to Tucson, she replies to me, "What is this? How far is Tucson? How long are you going to be away from home?" And I reply, "I don't know. My teacher told me that I need to go to college in order to make something of myself." It is now moving day, and we start to pack our little car with the things that I need for Tucson. We start to hit the road as we start to leave Chinle. I see the one grocery store called Bash's. I see the Wildcat Den where I used to play basketball. I also see horses and sheep roaming the road, and it takes about 5 minutes for us to leave Chinle. And as we're approaching the last intersection, I turn around in the car and take one last mental picture of home. 7 long hours later, we finally arrive in Tucson, Arizona, and head to the campus. I step out of the car and the Tucson heat automatically hits me. I'm bombarded by the sirens, the vehicles moving left and right, seeing restaurants that I've never heard of before. I also see a bunch of white people as well. We head to my dorm where I lived in the Native American Living Learning community with 20 to 30 other Native American students from different tribes. These students over the course of the next 4 years became my family. So the rest of the day, my family and I explored the Tucson community as well as the campus. The day flew by so fast that it was already time for my family to head back to the reservation. As I'm getting ready to say my goodbyes, a knot gets in my throat. My heart starts beating fast as I'm getting ready to say goodbye. My mom hugs me as she says, "Ayo ninishne shiyaje," I love you, my little one. My stepdad Lee hugs me and tells me that I will be okay and that I could do this. My little brother Junior is trying to hide his sadness. Waving goodbye, I see the car go down the road and around the corner, and they are now gone. Heading back up to my dorm room, I'm sitting there quietly, looking at the walls, trying to avoid looking at the Edward Collins poster that my roommate put up. I'm emotionally drained, so I decide to take a nap on my new twin-size bed. I go to grab the pillow, and underneath the pillow, I hear crinkles. What is this? I find a letter that my baby brother wrote me. I start to read the letter, and he says, I'm going to miss you while you're at college, and then I'm not going to see you for a long time. I love you. My tears finally release, and I wipe my face because I'm reminded again that I have to do this for my community and my family. The next morning, I head to my first class on campus and find over 2,000 students in the classroom. I got so scared to the point where I ran out of the classroom and I just walked. I walked and walked and walked on campus, and immediately I stop. I look around me, and all I see are brick walls, cement walls, white people everywhere. I'm not home. I look up to the sky, and I see a row of palm trees. At that very moment, everything around me stops. I'm reminded again how small I feel and how I feel invisible on campus. Immediately, I snap out of it because I'm reminded again that I need to do this, that I have people looking up to me. So I told myself, get involved and find a community on campus. I met other Native students at the Native American Student Center on campus. This was my home away from home. I was surprised to hear that I was selected to be a speaker at the first year scholars program that year. It felt so great to share words of encouragement with my peers, as well as celebrate with my community as I received the Outstanding Freshman Award. No matter how homesick I got, no matter how much I wanted to give up, I couldn't, because my success was the success of my community. On the last day of my senior year, I returned back to the same road with the palm trees. Looking up, the palm trees were no longer tall. At that moment, I realized my growth as a Diné woman, as well as a first-generation college student. So who knew that graduation would come so quickly? At the Native American Student Affairs Convocation, our community and our families gathered as we celebrated this huge milestone for myself and other Native students. Sitting next to 20 Native graduates, we see in the crowd our families. We see grandmas and grandpas. We also see some res kids running around. I get called on stage to give my speech as a student keynote speaker. To my Indigenous brothers and sisters, we did it. To my family, thank you for teaching me the teachings of Ta, which is ego. I had to strive to keep going and to create pathways for people like me to advance degrees. So 1 month after graduation, I moved to Los Angeles to pursue my master's degree at UCLA. Driving my little Nissan car, listening to the song Indian Cars, I knew that this move would inspire others. Fast forward to 2017, my spark emerged again. I wanted to pursue myself, to pursue my PhD. And this was my way of giving back to my community because I wanted to create a path for other people like me in the academy. So here I am, scared and nervous, preparing for my dissertation defense, knowing that at the end of this Zoom call, I will be one of the 0.8 natives with a doctorate. With 10 minutes left before I need to log on to Zoom, my mom goes in the kitchen and burns some sage for me so she can say a prayer. My heart is beating so fast. My palms are sweaty, but I remind myself to calm down, to just focus on my mom's voice, because I knew that I could do this. Clicking the start meeting on Zoom, the Zoom room fills immediately with my supporters. 2 hours later, my advisor, Dr. Jameson Lopez, announced that I was now Dr. Charlinda Hodley. Taking in that huge moment, I see on the screen everybody is crying, everyone is clapping, and all of a sudden, I see my mom coming down the stairs. She is crying. She comes and gives me a hug and says to me, "Shiyaje, you did it." Taking in that moment, I realized that this was a huge accomplishment for myself and my community. And so out of nowhere, I hear my cousin's 6-year-old son, Keanu, on the Zoom call, and he goes to say, it is me, Keanu. At that very moment, I realized that I'm a cycle breaker. Closing the Zoom call and reflecting on my life accomplishments, I look at the degrees on the wall, I look at the letter framed by my brother, and I look at the bookshelf that I have filled with literature written by Indigenous scholars. I tell myself, we did it. We did it because of the teachings which is ego. I wouldn't be Dr. Hodley without the support of my family and my community.
Thank you, Charlinda, for taking us on that journey with you. Now, let's hear from one of our Humana heroes, agents in our region who do good while doing their jobs.
My name is Nida Figueroa, and I'm honored to serve our community by educating Medicare beneficiaries on the resources and the options available to them. But my job doesn't stop there. Throughout my career, I have met many people, and I want to tell you about one who's special to me. I met this woman while teaching an educational seminar on Medicare plans. She was recently widowed, and with her hair dyed deep purple, she wasn't what people think of a stereotypical senior. Her husband had handled all the paperwork, and now she was confused about her Medicare options. I slowed down our conversation and took the time to explain all her options. And with tears in her eyes, she told me that it made all the difference for her. Occasionally, I bump into someone at the pharmacy or while running errands who attended one of my educational seminars on healthy lifestyles. Often they're enthusiastic about what they've learned, telling me how they're now able to read food labels and discover hidden ingredients. To me, that's human care. The ability to provide a positive impact long after you've met someone. Whether it's sugar, the not-so-sweet truth, or protecting yourself from scams. These educational seminars I teach really make a difference in people's lives, helping our members feel comfortable in their healthcare choices.
Our fourth storyteller tonight is Leon Malmet, who will tell us about the family he lost and the family he gained through an extraordinary act of humanity.
At the age of 4.5, I became an orphan. My parents were born in Prestonsburg, a small village in eastern Poland, now part of Belarus. Each had 7 brothers and sisters. Each had lost their father during a typhus pandemic in the early 1900s. Both families, Jewish, were neighbors. They lived in extreme poverty. At the age of 24, 23, and 18, my parents-to-be, Cyril Malmet and Hannah Blum, immigrated to France to get away from the poverty, the murderous pogroms, the hate against Jews, and a bleak future. They did marry in 1930. A year later, my sister Rachel was born, and I followed 5 years later. Our parents had a good life in France. Our father was a tailor, our mother a seamstress, a skill they had learned working for our uncle, a successful tailor. They did alterations and manufactured children's clothes, which they sold on the open markets. World War II was declared on September 1st, 1939. The following year, Germany occupied France. Sunday, July 19, 1942, a dreadful day. 5 o'clock in the morning, a pounding on the door of our 3rd-floor apartment in Compiègne, 40 miles north of Paris, population 20,000. Papa, 34, is getting ready to go to the countryside to barter clothes for food, as he does every Sunday. Since he is no longer allowed to own a business, this is the way he feeds our family and pays the rent. He opens the doors, followed by her mother. On the landing, 2 French policemen, our parents knew well for having altered their uniforms at no charge a number of times. One barks a command, acting like they did not know our parents. Follow us to the police station, hurry. What did we do? What about our children? Our father says. No answer. The neighbors, Henri and Suzanne Riboulot, from the floor below, awakened by the loud voices, come to the 3rd landing. Papa is screaming, what about our children? Henri Riboulot pronounces the words that would save our lives. Monsieur and Madame Malmet, do not worry, we will take care of your children until you return. We learned a month later that the French police had handed our parents to the Gestapo shortly after their arrest. 10 days later, they were sent to Auschwitz in cattle cars, where her mother was either murdered on arrival or died during the transport. Our father became a slave. According to the German archives, he died between September 1944 and January 1945, the liberation of Auschwitz. Our parents were a quiet young couple with 2 children, well liked by all, well assimilated after 10+ years of living in France. Until the liberation of our town, we remained with the Riboulot family, in hiding most of the time, either in plain view, in a cellar, in the forest, in a chicken coop, or in a bomb shelter Papa had dug in the garden. We starved for more than 2 years. We lived in fear 24/7 of being denounced. Our neighbors, our school teachers, the town hall employees were constantly tempted by additional ration cards offered by the Nazis for exposing Jews and others. January 9, 1944. I was less than 2 minutes away from certain death that day. On the last roundup of the remaining undesirables, mostly Jews, underground fighters, communists, and others, the truck driver, a Frenchman, could not read our address, which was the first one on the list. It was stained by a coffee spill. He was told to proceed with the others. Among them was our little cousin Charlo, 5 years old, who was also hidden by a Christian family. Maman Suzanne, coming home from work on her bicycle, saw the infamous black truck. She had a foreboding feeling that my sister and me were in the truck. She was about 10 minutes from our apartment. She pedaled as fast as she could, screaming as she opened the street door, "Leon, get out, get out!" Papa Henri, who had stayed home from work because I was sick, told me, "Run, run, go over the garden wall. I will meet you on the other side of the field." I am 7 years old. I hear the SS truck coming to a stop. I fly down the stairs to the back door, ran 100 yards length of the garden, scaled and jumped the 5 to 6 foot stone wall, crossed the field, and met Papa Henri waiting for me with his bicycle. I was saved by a coffee spill. At last, American troops liberated our town on November 1st, 1944. Church bells were ringing, people were kissing the soldiers and each other. American flags appeared at every window and at the hands of the people. The crowd was delirious, free at last from these monsters. It took another 6 months before the war ended on May 8th, 1945. I was 8, Rachel 13. Our parents would appear any day, any minute now. We were waiting for the knock on the door. It never came. There is not one day in my life I do not think of them. I did not think of them, and I will not think of them for every day. A few months later, ensuing a court battle, an uncle and aunt who survived the war took us away from this loving family that saved us and loved us. I was so upset. I lost trust in adults. How can a judge, a stranger, tears us away from my second parents, the only parents I knew? 2 years later, another hardship. I am 10 years old. My sister and I are separated against our will. She is assigned to an aunt in New York. I will not see her or hear her voice for 13 years. Now it's 1963. My sister and her husband, Izzy, come to France and convince my pregnant wife and me to emigrate to the US. February 1964, 5 a.m. We pass by with intense emotion the Statue of Liberty. As we approached, with hope, trepidation, and apprehension, New York Harbor. Did I make the right decision to immigrate? After 18 years in New York, we moved to San Francisco, Silicon Valley. I knew then for sure that I had made the right choice. I stayed very close to my family, Papa Henri, Mama Suzanne, René, and Marcel until their death, and nowadays to their descendants. Hitler and his demented followers with a powerful army and diabolical intentions failed once more in the history of the planet, and fortunately for humanity, goodness triumphed over evil. As long as I live, I will never, never forget this heroic family, Henri, Suzanne, René, and Marcel Riboulot. They saved my sister and me from certain death at the risk of their own lives. I wished our educators, religious leaders, and elected officials would remind us of the tragic events of World War II and its sequels. They should remind us of the evil of wars, racism, anti-Semitism, and religious hatred that bring suffering, misery, and death. Despite the instability of the world, I remain optimistic. Life to me is like the sky. It is dark at times. However, the clouds always dissipate and the beautiful blue sky does come back.
Such an astounding and powerful story. Thank you, Leon, so much for sharing. Our final storyteller tonight is Kirsten Coy-Garber, who found herself when she found her name, and she found her name when she found her instrument.
My name is Coy, K-O-Y. People say, what an unusual name, and weren't my parents creative? There's a story to my name, and I like to say that if you want to hear it, you got to buy me a drink. Actually, there's a story behind each letter. And so here today, for one time only, you get the story of 2 letters for free. K is for Kirsten. It means child of Christ. That was my given name. We were a conservative Air Force family, and we moved around quite a bit. New move, new home, new school, new church. So the first Sunday in the new town was always the Sunday morning ritual of search for church. Picture 4-year-old me in itchy tights and a scratchy dress and stiff, shiny shoes, waiting in the back of the car for Dad's verdict. He would leave it running, dash into a church, ask key questions, come back out, shake his head at Mom, and we'd move on. I never had a say in the church that we chose. I didn't have a say in the clothes that I wore. I was always uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable in my clothes. I was uncomfortable in church. I was even uncomfortable in my own family. My role was to be invisible, to keep people from being angry. I was afraid to ask for anything because yes, I did not hear very often, and no was the most familiar feeling. In 9th grade, I was 9, and in 4th grade, and we were at yet another new school. The music teacher played orchestral instruments for us, and when I heard the cello, my soul was reborn. I rushed to be the first one to play that instrument, and I embraced it. And when I plucked the C string, it resonated with my very core. I didn't even know that I had a core. I was going home to ask for a cello. The answer? We'll see. Oh my goodness, we'll see. That is so close to a yes. So I waited. And a week later, my dad hands me a viola. I was gonna complain, but then I realized I'd better take what I can get. It seems like the viola chose me and would continue to make choices for me for the rest of my life. Well, every time we moved after that, the viola chose my second family, the orchestra, and also my best friends, the viola section. We had a common bond of mutual identity crisis. And this crisis was based on the fact that nobody knew what a viola was. What is a viola anyway? And our part in the orchestra was often deemed less important because it was mellow and not as interesting as everybody else's. So we fiercely embraced our role as a supporting actor and also took it very importantly to be invisible in the section. Invisible, that was another common theme. In high school, I got really competitive and required a better viola, and bigger is better in the viola world. My very first big yes was a gigantic, gorgeous viola. My little hands could barely get around it, could barely navigate it, but the tone was so worth it. It was like riding a chocolate wave. I couldn't put it down. I practiced like 5 hours a day. And over time, I developed a blemish on my neck. We called it the viola hickey. And it was a mark of greatness in this world. Non-musicians, they would see it and they would make fun of me and tease me and say, "Who gave that to you?" Of course, I have to name my viola a sexy name so that I could honestly say, it was Carl who gave it to me. Carl, my first lover. So often with love comes pain. By the end of my senior year, I had a locked jaw, shut tight from all the tension. I could barely open it. But I plugged along because Carl was my ticket. He was my full ride ticket. He chose my universities for me, and he chose my music degrees for me. And the flip side to this full ride was pain. By the end of the road to my master's degree, I had shooting red darts down my left thumb and daggers in my bow arm and white hot little balls of pain under my shoulder blades. Throughout my career, I sought professionals and professors and specialists to try and help fix my pain. The answer was always no. Can't fix you. The only solution that somebody came up with was, you know what, your viola's too big. You should get a small one. So by my 30s, I had to abandon my chocolatey lover and exchange him in for a smaller model. And that was not a good choice. The sound was not the same, nor was the relationship. It was utilitarian, a marriage of convenience. And the pain got worse. So 10 years of this disappointment, and a colleague told me, you should try Alexander technique. It is a method of retraining your body mentally to help you find more ease in movement. Sold, sign me up. So I booked a session, and the trainer watched me play viola. She didn't fix my pain, but I got so curious about my habits. I found a new calling. So it seems my little viola chose the next chapter in my life. I'm 40, and reinventing myself through this study. I noticed my habits and I became aware of my body. And through this study, my viola gave me my next new family, the practitioners in the Alexander work, dedicated to waking up and accessing the body's full potential. Did the trainer ever fix my pain? No. Well, this is where the why in Coy shows up. There was a workshop, and we were in a group of 3, and we were supposed to study the power of yes and no in the body. So in our little group of 3, one of us was supposed to ask for help. One of us was to respond with yes or no. And one of us was the silent witness, and we'd rotate. When it was my turn to ask for help, I said, "Please help me play viola without pain." So I took my viola and I began to play. My fellow trainee just stood there. Well, I figured I could wait for the answer and keep playing, so I kept playing. No answer. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no. Soon, I got lost in a really difficult passage. And I got madder, more and more angry at myself and at the viola. And the pain got worse. No answer. I was furious. Suddenly, I paused just for a moment and got really quiet. And I noticed my little viola for the first time. I realized how beautiful she was. And I felt a wave of remorse when I realized I had been blaming her for my pain and my discomfort all of these years. So I asked for forgiveness. And a very tiny space just opened up inside of me, very new. And from there, I asked her, "What do you have to teach me?" All of a sudden, my spine spiraled up. And I felt weightless and powerful all at the same time. My fellow trainee began to dance, and our silent witness began to sob uncontrollably. Our trainer from across the room looked over at us and came on over and said, "Give me a recap." She wanted to know what was going on. To the best of my ability, I explained that while waiting for an answer, I found an answer on my own. And she looked at me into my innermost being, and she said, "Kirsten, you just said yes to yourself." So the Y in Coy stands for yes to me. I named my little viola Theophilus, which means friend of God, because she helped me find my core again. Now it doesn't matter if I feel brief discomfort with my family or in church or while playing a difficult passage, because I have learned what yes feels like, and then it comes from inside of me.
Thank you so much, Coy. Looks like the entire West Coast owes you a drink. Remember, you may want to clap or cheer for tonight's Storytellers with the like button and reactions. But that wraps it up. Thank you to all of our Storytellers tonight: Leon Malmet, Melissa Sosa Fees, Dr. Charlinda Hodley, Kirsten Coy-Garber, and Sean Ewart. And a huge thank you to our audience tonight. Thanks from all of us at the Storytellers Project for joining us for a night of storytelling. Bye.